So there are a lot of initiatives from the government side and NBFC and RBI side, and RBI has, if you note the digital payment index which has been released early January by RBI, the digital payment has grown by 2x from 2017. So that shows the potential, and I'm sure there is significant opportunity for banks and non-banking business. Having said that, security is still a big concern.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Today it is an honor and a pleasure for me to introduce you all to this very particular session where we are going to know more about the future of banking. My name is Harsh and I'm going to moderate this session for all of you, wherein I'm going to introduce you all about the event and perhaps the person who is going to interact and address all of us. First of all, I request you to kindly acknowledge and welcome the presence of our esteemed guest, and she is very dynamic, very interesting, and very bold personality, none other than Madam Geethi Panikar, who is here with us. I would like to request all the persons, those who are watching this session on YouTube, to kindly upload in the comment section and welcome the presence of our esteemed guest. Madam Geethi Panikar currently holds the position of Senior Vice President Risk at HSBC. She is a banker with 16 plus years of experience in corporate banking and risk management across leading public, private, and foreign banks. As a COO for risk function, she is responsible for unlocking human potential, process efficiencies, innovation, and digitalization. As a futurist, her mission is to reimagine and lead digital transformation in banking to empower customers. She is technophile who believes in combined intelligence and a blockchain community with coexisting nodes of machine and humans. And I believe her profile has so many things, so many glories, which I won't be able to explain in a few minutes, but I'm pretty sure during this conversation we are going to learn a lot from her. So, first of all, ma'am, I welcome you to in this session. Thank you so much for joining and agreeing to share your thoughts with us. We are extremely very happy to have you for today's talk.
Thank you, Harsh, and thank you very much for this opportunity to interact with you and your audience. It's a great honor and a great opportunity to listen to the thoughts of young generation and also share some of my experience with all of your audience.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much, ma'am. It's our pleasure too. So, ma'am, moving to the topic of today's session, which we have chosen, is exploring the future of banking sector. Ma'am, my first question to you is how digital transformation is actually shaping the future of banking sector.
Okay. So, if you remember a couple of years ago, uh, we used to go to the bank branches for our transactions. Now, very few times in a year, you go, maybe in a completely unavoidable circumstances, you have to go to the branch. We saw two events, demonetization and this lockdown, where you could not get access to the branch, maybe a long queue was there, cash was not available. Lockdown, the movement itself was restriction. It is at that point of time, I think Indians fully realized the benefit of digitalization and our Prime Minister's vision around digital India, and the mission of Reserve Bank of India and the government together to ensure that digitalization brings more inclusive banking across India. So this is a great ambition. And we started it long back when the ATMs were introduced. A lot of visits to the branches were diverted to ATM. And subsequently, we started getting RTGS, UPI transactions, NEFT 24 by 7 has started. So all of this is focusing on one thing, giving more access to people for transactions, be it payments, deposit, or even lending nowadays. Uh, Additionally, it is also creating the ease of access. So, an increased digital literacy can be seen more in metros. But even today, despite all these digitalization, only 19% of India has access to a good internet. Well, in terms of numbers, India is the largest or third largest economy with mobile and mobile internet users. Still, our rural population don't have access to all these digital products and banking service. And it is that context that India and many other developing nations look forward to digitalization as a means to reach out to the poorest of the poor, which is the vision of our Mahatma Gandhi, to give the access to the most innermost villages in India. So when I talk about digitalization, it is not just limited to payments or the front office customer service. Now, in this decade, we will see gradually the front office solutions even getting expanded to middle office and back office. So, a lot of robo advisors, um, treasury trading, algorithmic trading, a lot of such other areas within banking, which the customer is not facing a day-to-day basis, is also getting digitalized. Now, what is the benefit of out of it? Of course, a lot of us bankers initially used to spend on analyzing these transactions, executing these transactions, and a lot of man hours was being spent. And machines can beat definitely human beings in terms of speed and efficiency. So initial investment is into these technologies certainly expensive. However, gradually, if you look at the chatbots, which have replaced a lot of call center interaction, conversational bots have really helped to give answers so quickly for the traditional routine questions. So in that sense, I think these new technologies have certainly helped a lot of pain point, help to avoid a lot of pain point for the customers, as well as save time of bankers instead of spending all this time in analyzing these transactions, coming up with solution. Now the bots or the digital solutions gives the solutions or analytics insight to the bankers, who then can act on it. So now deriving insight rests with the bots or the solutions, whereas based on those insight, acting is now based on the base lying with the banker's head. So that's the way it has really helped the banking system. There are two sides to it, pros and cons. We can use these digital technologies for the benefit of banks and financial community. However, there are threats also caused by these technology, which we will probably discuss in subsequent questions.
All right, ma'am. It was really a very quite insightful answer from your side. Ma'am, my next question to you is security still concern for further growth of digital payments?
Certainly. So digital payment in India has really is a matter of pride. I think the kind of growth that you have witnessed. I was going through some of the reports around UPI transactions, how it really in the lockdown it has really helped a lot of people to transact and get access to money. If you look at the December stats, UPI has gone on a year-on-year basis. Over 70% of growth has been recorded for UPI transaction, which is an amazing feat in a country like India. But as I said earlier, only 19% has access to mobile internet penetration, and that means there is a significant opportunity for companies and the government to spread digital payment. However, it has got a lot of barriers too, and security is just one of them. I'll focus on security, but the other barriers are, of course, awareness among the population, irrespective of the age group. So the older generation may still prefer personal banking services because of the fear and lack of awareness about how to use these technology. There are other things like the infrastructure, the broadband infrastructure, and its stability. Having access to Google Pay no access to Google Pay at critical moments, you still want cash in your hands to be safer. So these are some of the challenges digital payments are trying to overcome, and definitely government is trying to educate more through means like DigiShala, the NPCI's effort. All of them are an Aadhaar-based payments. A lot of UPI 20 NEFT was made 24/7. RTGS has been now made 24/7. So there are a lot of initiatives from the government side and NPS side and RBI side, and RBI has, if you note the digital payment index, which has been released early January by RBI, the digital payment has grown by 2x from 2017. So that shows the potential, and I'm sure there is significant opportunity for banks and non-banks in this space. Having said that, security is still a big concern. In the lockdown period, all the banks and financial institutions, and not only banks and financial institutions, almost all companies witnessed significant increase in cybersecurity threats. Phishing was the number one, and then DDoS attacks. You saw a credential being sold in the dark web, and a lot of news about leakage. And the other is resilience. When the volume suddenly surged, a couple of financial institutions were not able to cope with the increased volume, leading to outages. And this is referring to some of the large institutions in country who are really good with their system. So these are, I think, security and resilience are two important areas that all the players in the industry has to keep in mind. And the only way to overcome is, of course, using these better technology so that you can anticipate these threats and act quickly beyond the human intelligence using artificial intelligence based security system. Second would be using more of biometric security systems. Even those can be hacked, I know, but still related to the human intelligence, biometric can help in authentication of the transaction. The third would be continuing the digital education as well as cyber education, starting from the schools and colleges, and who can then teach the older generation. So these three things and giving more access can help people to have greater confidence in digital transaction, and that will help in growing this 2x growth into 4x or maybe 10x in the coming decade.
All right, ma'am. Again, it was a quite insightful answer from your side, and I must say it's a kind of privilege today we got to hear all those things from you. My next question to you is: cashless economy. Is society ready for this transformation?
I think compared to maybe a few years down the line when the demonetization was announced, remember the kind of resistance from the society due to various factors. One is, of course, lack of awareness of the benefits. Then the fear of being traced, the transactions being traced, large value transactions getting detected, which were not under the radar of taxation. So these were two factors which were driving. Of course, the fear about cybersecurity and privacy, data privacy, also was riding behind this fear. But since then, if you look at our society, at least in the metro and maybe tier 1, tier 2 cities, you can see the infrastructure has evolved. If you go to a shop today, most of the shops, at least in metros, you can see 100% of the shops or 90% are equipped to support a digital transaction. And the cost has also substantially gone down with the kind of various measures RBI and NPCI has announced. So, and the technology has also evolved, making it more easy to transact. However, even today, like there are a lot of trolls which come on social media about how people relied on certain quick products, and then suddenly due to internet outage or network down, they could not make the payment, and then they were not carrying cash also. So you need to have a BCP also. The cash will continue as a BCP. For small time payments. However, for big time, high value payments, definitely it's high time that we move to digital modes and traceable modes, so that our economy largely becomes a reliance on white money, and we can succeed in the fight against black money. Now, that itself, large value transactions in many sectors like real estate or property, bullion, gold, and jewelry, still there is a lot of push for cash-based transaction. This is a mindset issue and, of course, a cultural issue. I think government based on all the execution efforts, and income tax department are also pushing for white-based transaction or non-cash-based transaction. If it succeeds, maybe it will take a few more years for more transparent transaction. It's also about a mindset and cultural change in India. It's not just about having a high-tech infrastructure for digital payment. The usage also will depend upon this cultural change. So once the technology marries the culture, I think that is a point where we are fully ready. And I think a few more years will be needed to completely become a cashless society. But having said that, totally digital means of any kind of transaction have its own perils too. sudden outages in any of these infrastructure. If you remember, Mumbai one day had a complete power breakdown. Google had an outage. So going forward, now it's just a beginning. Maybe cyber attacks can bring down the electricity in a city, affect power stations or affect networks. In that situation, emergency transactions should not be withheld. So I'm not a big supporter of 100% cash. These views are very personal, but 100% of transaction. But definitely there should be a greater amount of transparency and maybe high degree of digitalization.
Indeed, ma'am. Thank you so much for sharing all this information with us. And I think the viewers, those who are watching this session, they will learn many things from this session. And not only I think, but I do strongly believe this. Ma'am, my next question to you is how artificial intelligence is influencing the banking sector?
Like all sectors, I think it's a great question. Like all sectors, artificial intelligence is influencing banking also in a positive way. We have started, if you look at the first initial use cases, were always the chatbots, then digital platform for payments, lending. Lending has really relied on scorecards built based on artificial intelligence and machine learning. So these were some of the initial use cases the businesses were after. Then it went into wealth and personal banking, so that 360-degree customer profile can be built based on advanced data analytics brought in by these data bots or data robots. Subsequently, it started making more inroads into the other departments in banking, be it treasury, be it risk management and compliance. So compliance greatly relies on artificial intelligence these days. So to give you an example, alert monitoring for KYC and AML black money transactions. Earlier, it used to be 3 layers of manual check, whereas a bot or artificial intelligence-based alert monitoring system can quickly achieve the system, aggregating the insights from different transactions that the customer is making, comparing it with the profile. So manual effort has completely become easy, and cybersecurity is another area where artificial intelligence is deployed to proactively spot anomalies. It helps in anomaly detection. And the moment the anomaly is detected, it actually sometimes initiates security measures on its own, or it immediately alerts the human beings involved in security system. So these are some of the examples which I can think of in the banking system. Similarly, a lot of monitoring tasks, a lot of analytics job are being also, models are also built based on artificial intelligence and machine learning. So these are some of the areas banks are using, and similar like other organizations. Now this has created a lot of opportunity for students and created new careers like data science, machine learning officers, modelers, etc. But at the same time, this is also creating challenge because, of course, large-scale deployment always displaces some amount of traditional jobs and creates new jobs. So employees need to be upskilled to take up those new jobs, or reskilled to take up other jobs when they are getting shifted from the traditional core area. So this is the potential challenges. And the other important challenge banks and all organizations, but particularly banks, need to take care is the bias risk which artificial intelligence brings. To give you an example, modeling which for the corporate loan or retail loan takes place with a lot of reliance on artificial intelligence. Now, that means the success depends upon the data which is being fed into this models, or the data which is used to develop these artificial intelligence models. Now, if that contains an inherent bias, the model will also throw out some biased model. Now, this bias can be based on things like race, religion, locality, gender. It can be anything. So before deploying artificial intelligence-based models or solution, banks need to be very, very careful that it doesn't carry any bias or which is not right as per the principles and values that it stands for. So containing this bias is the biggest challenge modelers and artificial intelligence experts are trying to deal with. Now, this is also equally important in recruitment solutions too. Sometimes profiles are being fed and the system makes the decision. Now, maybe the past recruitment decisions and bias come into the system. and system also makes those kind of mistakes. And that is where in my profile, when you read out, I said about combined intelligence. While artificial intelligence, no matter how good it is, I believe in combined intelligence due to two reasons. One, because of the ethics of displacement, dealing with displacement. So, artificial intelligence may be really beneficial for mankind, but it doesn't mean that people can live without jobs. So, if you deploy too much without offsetting the challenges that human race will feel, of course, there will be a day where all the human beings are sitting idle without job and machines are earning. Now we can't have a sustainable world with a sustainable, if you look at the sustainable goals of equality and fairness. So based on that, I believe that human beings should sustain and should be reskilled or upskilled, and the usage should be limited to extremely beneficial areas rather than um, just being utilized for taking the economic advantage. Second is a bias risk and challenges. So because of these two reasons, I think human oversight on efficient artificial intelligence, combined intelligence, is the way forward.
All right, ma'am. I was listening you very carefully. You have given a new term called combined intelligence, and I think we should all need to look into this because artificial may or may not be. We are not looking into this, but it will surely going to affect the jobs of the people. And as you have mentioned that, and hopefully it is going to create a job in many different domains called data analytics, data science, and cyber security. Ma'am, my next question to you is. Uh, Career opportunities in banking sector, where are we now and what is in future?
So the opportunities are several, and particularly the youngsters. I think the topics which I mentioned: cybersecurity, data sciences, analytics, data visualization, artificial intelligence, blockchain, machine learning. These are new technologies which are uh, taking a lot of getting a lot of investments from banks and financial institutions. So that means youngsters who are finishing their MBA or post graduation, either in stats or economics or in finance. Typically, these are the people who try to go into banking. It is also good to complement their basic post graduation or graduation with these additional qualifications. Certainly, that will increase your probability of finding good jobs in the initial phase, as well as transitioning your career will become very easy, because if banks are adopting this technology, they will need people also to possess these technology, even those within already existing in banks that are trying to upskill themselves based on these courses. So that's one thing that all of you need to be mindful. Second is, when machines take over these core jobs, um, the focus is that bankers get into more um, analyzing and visualizing and strategizing and being very creative in their jobs. So these are some of the soft skills which are also highly in demand. Being creative, that means, can you rethink banking using these technology? Maybe traditionally we have been doing some activity in a particular fashion, but can you completely rethink giving access to the product or servicing the product when these new bots are, so that the customer finds it extremely easy to come to the bank and goes with delight. So that's the kind of creativity expected from the bankers. So creativity, communicating with impact, uh, storytelling, communicating, those aspects becomes very important for success in banking. In addition to banking career, core banking career, the financial system is expanding. So you're seeing a lot of fintechs coming in, lots of interesting products in payments, lending. Even the lending ecosystem is also what we see today. You go to a branch, give application, then the bank giving loan after due diligence. That's completely becoming digitalized now. Then you can sit in, like I'm working on a product where you can sit at home and get your loan. Not even a single visit to the branch or anywhere is not required. So, and there are a lot of such products outside already. Within 10 to 20 minutes, your loan, if you are eligible, you can get the loan, or your wealth survey. So, if that is the case, um, there is a lot of fintechs coming, a lot of investments coming. So, this is a great sector going to get a lot of opportunity. The pandemic has temporarily put a break for the high speed growth that the banks should ideally have, because the economy itself is going through some recessionary mode. But I think once the vaccine rollout is over, the movement related restrictions are over, and when we have greater confidence to step out without the fear of illness, this economy is going to go back to its original glory and perhaps move ahead. Because now we have seen in the last 1 year, so much of digitalization have taken place, and people have also adopted that digitalization positively. They had no choice but to go digital. So I think this will be a great opportunity. You should, and if I will say finance students, please do try for opportunity or a short stint with any of these financial institutions. There are a lot of fintechs in Bangalore, Mumbai, Pune, Hyderabad. So if you ever get an opportunity to do a, let's say, short-term project or a small assignment, do that, because you can firsthand experience the change and you'll become more passionate and you can redefine the bank.
All right, ma'am. Then we can conclude that if 2020 was all about the survival, then 2021 will be all about the consciously planning of the future of banking, the future of health, and the future of education, and we can say the future of almost everything. Ma'am, today we are short of time, and also I don't want to take you much time. So, moving to my last question of this session, actually the question is, we have seen in everywhere the introduction of gig economy in every sector, but banking is the only sector where the gig economy hasn't yet arrived. What is the main reason behind this?
So there are multiple reasons. While let's say gig worker or freelance, those concepts are very appealing. However, banks are restrained by a lot of regulations. So there are two types of regulations. One, third-party risk regulations, which are there imposed by RBI. Then the second are around data privacy regulations. These are the two, and of course the labor laws related constraints. So there are three sets of regulations governing the application or appointment or utilization of gig workers. So as per the outsourcing regulation or the third party regulations, having multiple third parties and fourth parties and fifth parties are permitted, subject to a lot of regulations and due diligence. And it's not just onboarding them, till exit, the continuous monitoring is required. So banks then typically will rely on robust controls operated by the third parties on these workers. So rather than they themselves employing a lot of independent workers, they will rely on third parties who have an army of such workers. So because the controls are managing these people, including the security, because these workers will get access to the systems of the bank, cyber security becomes a concern, physical security becomes a concern. And because in gig economy, this is a brief association, and then you change your company or services to another place. So for that brief interaction, no matter how expert these people are, that the cost incurred for due diligence and monitoring is significantly high. So if you compare, then you can actually get another third-party firm who's specialized in managing the worker. You only get the service. You need to focus on the service and overall significant third party. Then banks would naturally prefer such a strong third parties. So that is one. Second is data privacy regulations are evolving. So as the number of touch points evolve, let's say that you have an array of gig workers, you have to also monitor them. How are you exchanging data with them? How are you ensuring these controls becomes very, very critical. And hence, given all these challenges, and of course there are labor laws where, let's say, if you employ them for a certain period, then they can claim permanency. Then a lot of other conditions attached, and even the law is not fully evolved for banking sector, how to deal with these workers. So these are some of the challenges which are maybe causing the banks to step back and reflect and see how things are evolving. But certainly, I think in the next decade, you will see this also as a new trend in banking, at least for areas where the expertise required is very costly. So from a cost efficiency, let's say a very highly advanced cyber expert. Okay, so if you employ them for a limited area, the cost will be very, very high. Whereas, let's say a service only for ethical hacking, then you can actually go ahead and seek the service of an individual who is a cyber expert in that field. Bank may employ or legal services. Such areas banks may use rather than having its own department, cloud services, etc. But beyond that, right now, I don't see, given the kind of, and these outsourcing regulation, data privacy restrictions are getting tightened day by day. In that context, banks would be wary, but I don't think they will be against, they will be wary and they will.
Again, ma'am, it was a quite insightful answer from your side, and I must say there's a lot to learn from you. Ma'am, it was a healthy discussion with you. Thank you so much for joining and giving your important time. We look forward to conduct more session with you in future. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining and giving your important time.
Thank you, Harsh, and very good question. I hope all of you could benefit from the answers. In case you have further questions, you're free to approach me via LinkedIn. Typically, I respond to most of the queries. So all the best to a great future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
On the ground is where I stand. Never give up, that was always the plan. It's so cold outside. I'm alone, I'm alright. It's so cold outside. I'm alone.